In this video, we're going to explore the character arc for the lead protagonist, Song Gi-Hun, known as Player 456 in the series Squid Game, Season 1 from episodes 1 to 3. As a disclaimer, there will be spoilers to the story moving forward, so I recommend checking out Season 1 of Squid Game before proceeding further. The way we think of stories has changed with streaming series. Beforehand, we had the average 2-hour feature film plus long-form series on cable and broadcast TV. Now, with streaming platforms, a limited series with 9 episodes essentially becomes a 9-hour film. So looking at one character's arc over a season reveals interesting ways to build a narrative journey. Per usual, I'm referencing Judith Weston's directing actors. Weston describes 3 concepts: the spine, the objective, and the intention. The spine is the overall goal that the character pursues throughout the story. The objective is a specific goal that the character wants to get from another character within a scene. The intention is the desired effect that one character wants to have on another character, often described as active verbs. So for our main character, Gi-Hun, the spine for him is to get out of financial debt and to win the games and survive. We'll go into individual scenes to look at his objectives, especially when interacting with other characters, and we'll specify his intentions as active verbs in these scenes. From these guidelines, I created a framework to organize my thoughts. First, we look at where the character is emotionally, at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end of each episode, mostly thinking about his emotional state, subtext, and specific character objectives. For 3 episodes, that means there will be 9 episodes we want to look at for Gi-Hun. Looking at the milestones helps me to see how Gi-Hun pivots from one point to the next, and how to build his performance. There are more turns and pivots within those 9 milestones, but I'm using these as a general overview. As an overall note, I'm going to focus on the major scenes for Gi-Hun in these episodes. Let's start with episode 1. There's a lot of world building that happens over the first 2 episodes to create the world and its tone in Squid Game, but there are specific scenes where Gi-Hun is interacting with key people in his life, including his daughter, his mother, and the gangsters who threaten his life. As a first milestone, we can ask, where is Gi-Hun at the beginning of the story? The first couple scenes establish that he is a man that's down and out, loaded with debt, and estranged from most of the relationships in his life. He's desperate, but prone to quick fixes. He thinks in the short term and gets in his own way. He reacts to changes in his environment and antagonistic forces around him. Gi-Hun is a man that is vulnerable to being preyed on by others. In the first scene where we see Gi-Hun, he is sitting at his mother's home. They're discussing his daughter's birthday, and we learn that his mother's supporting him. I ask myself, what does Gi-Hun want to get from his mom in this scene? As an objective, he's trying to convince his mom to give him money to spend for his daughter's birthday gift. But he's covering. He really wants to use most of the money to gamble. So verbs for Gi-Hun are to convince or to argue. There's additional textures to his performance as well. If we use Judith Weston's ideas about the as-if or metaphor in the scene, I think Gi-Hun is trying to convince his mom as if he's a man at the end of his rope. This gives his performance an angry quality. He's run out of options. He's acting as if he's giving an ultimatum to his mom in order to push her to give him money. By the scene's end, we see that he's covering when he goes to the cupboard and steals a bank card from his mom's hidden stash. He's a bit of a two-faced, manipulative man. The next few scenes further characterize Gi-Hun as a man who's not in control of his situation, and he's often making more trouble for himself. He goes to the horse races to gamble money, then gets beaten up by gangsters wanting to collect payment on previous loans. He begs one of the gambling clerks to return some money that he gave her as a gift. He struggles to get a gift for his daughter at an arcade until a kid helps him. Also, it's interesting to note that the visual motifs of an arcade help to set up the childlike qualities of the games later in the series. Throughout all these scenes, we're seeing Gi-Hun's overall goal for the season take shape. He's in financial trouble, and he wants to get out of it. The next scene to look at in detail is when he's eating a birthday dinner with his daughter at a food stand. Gi-Hun tries to pass himself off as a suitable father to his daughter, but she constantly calls him out on his shiftiness. Playable verbs for Gi-Hun in the scene could be to appease, to convince, to placate. His objective could be to convince his daughter that he's a good dad, and to get her to affirm him as a good dad through a return of affection or approval. But true to form, Gi-Hun gets in his own way, as seen when they open the gift box and it turns out to be a prop gun with a lighter. From his daughter's reaction, it's clear that she wasn't pleased with the gift. For the as-if or metaphor in the scene, I thought of Gi-Hun approaching the scene as if he was wanting to make and keep secrets with his daughter. This informs the chummy way he approaches her. He's using this special time between them to preserve their relationship. So far, this scene with his daughter connects with how we've seen Gi-Hun operate. He was manipulative toward his mother in the earlier scene, and here he's applying a gentler manipulation on his daughter to make her feel good on her birthday. In a new scene, we then see Gi-Hun playing the Dachi envelope game in the subway station with a mysterious gentleman. At first, Gi-Hun tries to get the gentleman to leave him alone, so playable verbs could be to intimidate, to mock, or to push away. But once they play the game, Gi-Hun shifts to competing. Gi-Hun's first objective in the scene was to make the gentleman go away, but he steps into a second objective once the game is revealed. He wants to get the gentleman to pay him money for any wins. This one scene also encapsulates Gi-Hun's situation so far in the story. He's constantly caught in this cycle of frequently losing and suffering the consequences of his choices. At the scene's end, when the mysterious gentleman presents the card leading to the eventual games on the island, Gi-Hun is demanding or confronting the gentleman. The gentleman reveals Gi-Hun's personal information and he wants to know how this guy got it. This envelope scene also lays down the motif of playing a game that will manifest towards the end of the episode during the red light, green light sequence. So far, this scene also connects with what we saw earlier for Gi-Hun. He's still pursuing the overall objective of getting out of his financial debt. After Gi-Hun has a conversation with Sang-woo's mom at a food stand and also talks with his own mom back home, we start to approach the middle of the episode when Gi-Hun calls the number to join the games. So where is he emotionally at this point of the story? I think Gi-Hun has hit close to rock bottom. He doesn't have any feasible options to make money and gain custody of his daughter. Compared to the beginning of the episode, his situation has progressively gotten worse through all his choices. When I look back at the playable verbs he used in earlier scenes, I notice they all have a dishonest quality to them. He's usually on the defensive and just scraping by as he gets in and out of bad situations. So I think the story has built up enough context for us to believe that he would take desperate measures to fulfill his overall objective, and this ties into joining the games on the island. The next scene we'll look at is where Gi-Hun meets the old man Oh Il-nam, known as Player 1, in the barracks. We've entered the mysterious world of the games. Let's look at how Gi-Hun interacts with Il-nam. Gi-Hun is tending to, caring for Il-nam by asking questions and helping him to get acclimated to their strange new environment as a scene objective. Subtext-wise, it's possible that Gi-Hun's approach is almost as if he was talking to his own elderly father. Previously, we've seen Gi-Hun do a lot of not-so-honorable things, but the scene helps to restore his appeal. There's a contrast to the way Gi-Hun interacts with Il-nam compared to Gi-Hun's dynamic with his mother. Gi-Hun is less manipulative toward Il-nam in this scene, and he's much more kind. The episode starts to introduce other characters among the players as they head toward the red light, green light game. The next scene we'll look at is when Gi-Hun confronts Cho Sang-woo, his old neighborhood friend who is supposed to be a successful financial professional. As playable verbs, Gi-Hun interrogates, questions, and slightly shames Sang-woo to figure out why his friend is there, which could be his scene objective. Gi-Hun doesn't get the clarification that he wants from Sang-woo, and soon the game begins. This interaction reveals Gi-Hun taking a little more ownership in navigating his surroundings, but he isn't prepared for the horrors of the red light, green light game. When the killing starts during the red light, green light game, Gi-Hun shifts into survival mode like the other players. His objective is to clearly finish the game and emerge alive and unharmed. In these final beats of the episode, I thought of Judith Weston's definition of result form, which is the part of the performance we see or feel visibly on screen. So ways to describe the result form of Gi-Hun's performance here could be panicked or stressed. We can work backwards to identify possible playable verbs for him, such as to protect himself or to survive the game. We're now at the end of episode 1, so we can see that Gi-Hun has been reduced even further as a numbered player trying to survive the first game. He's acting from his most basic primal instincts to survive, and it's a far cry from where he was at the beginning of the episode, sitting on the floor at his mother's home. So the arc of Gi-Hun in this episode follows him from being a man down and out on his luck at the start, to now scrambling like an animal to barely survive. It shows how far his desperation has pushed him. Gi-Hun's character arc continues into the events of episode 2. His overall objective, i.e. to get out of financial debt, still holds strong, and we can explore the specific objectives he has in each scene. When we jump into the second episode, the players vote on if they should stay in the game. We learn they will all be sent home after player 1, Il-nam, breaks the vote tie. The next scene we'll look at is when Gi-Hun and another player, Kang Se-byuk, are left behind on a dark, empty street in Seoul after exiting the game. They've been blindfolded and tied up. After Se-byuk breaks free, Gi-Hun's scene objective is to get her to help untie him. but she hesitates because she knows he'll try to attack her for stealing his money at the horse races. Thinking about his verbs, Gi-Hun shifts into pleading and begging. Gi-Hun acts consistently with how we've seen him in earlier scenes. Here, he's scraping by, but he's also manipulating others. Gi-Hun wants to get Se-byuk to untie him because he eventually wants to shake her down for the money she stole earlier in episode 1. In a following scene, Gi-Hun goes to the police to report the games, but he's met with disbelief and resistance. For active verbs in his performance, Gi-Hun tries to convince and to persuade the police officer. As a scene objective, he wants to get the police to believe him and to get involved in stopping the games. But the police resist his arguments, so Gi-Hun transitions to an angrier tactic, reflected in his performance. He demands acceptance from the police, but to no avail. There's some similarities to the earlier scene with Se-byuk in the empty street, because here, Gi-Hun is using different tactics to manipulate the other person in the scene to get something he wants. If we look further back into episode 1, he employed similar manipulative tactics with his mother. Then, in another scene, Gi-Hun runs into Sang-woo in their neighborhood. As they smoke outside, Gi-Hun interrogates and questions Sang-woo, which we see are active verbs in his performance. As a scene objective, Gi-Hun wants to get Sang-woo to reveal the truth behind his financial troubles because it was revealed that Sang-woo has a lot of debt. I noticed that Gi-Hun tends to cope with his own troubles by being nosy and involving himself in other people's business and trying to offer solutions. Maybe this is a way to temporarily take his mind off of his own struggles. We see this mindset in the next scene when Gi-Hun chases after his mother when she leaves the hospital. As a scene objective, Gi-Hun wants to get his mom to go back into the hospital to receive medical care. For verbs in his performance, he chides and begs her to go back. The result form of his performance comes off as concerned and slightly hysterical. But he hasn't thought his approach all the way through. His mom reveals that Gi-Hun ended their insurance policy and squandered the remaining money, so she can't go back to the hospital. Since we're near the midpoint of episode 2, the scene with his mom reinforces Gi-Hun's situation. He's still pursuing his overall objective to get out of financial debt, and now the pressure's piling on more with his mom's medical needs. He comes out of the scene wanting to get more money to help her. We follow Gi-Hun as he unsuccessfully tries to beg a friend for money, to later sitting outside a convenience store and meeting the old man Il-nam again. As Gi-Hun and Il-nam share alcohol and ramyeon, it's interesting to note that Gi-Hun doesn't seem to try to manipulate Il-nam with any ulterior motives, unlike his earlier scenes with other characters. Similar to when they first met in the barracks, Gi-Hun tends to Il-nam in a caring way. As a scene objective, Gi-Hun wants to share a meal and drink and make Il-nam comfortable in the rain. As verbs, he welcomes and convinces Il-nam to sit down and share in a moment together. But the scene also functions to help Gi-Hun make a turn. Il-nam reveals he's going back to the games and that he thinks the mask guards were right. The torture out in the real world is worse than what they experience in the games. This plants a thought in Gi-Hun's mind to recognize his own bad situation and help him turn back to the games. In a later scene, Gi-Hun goes to his ex-wife at her apartment and begs her for money for his mother's sickness. She has nothing to give, and they're interrupted by Gi-Hun's daughter and his ex-wife's current husband. Gi-Hun leaves but is flagged down outside by the new husband who offers money if Gi-Hun never interferes with his family's life again. At the top of the scene, Gi-Hun has a scene objective to get money from his ex-wife, but it shifts to defending himself and trying to get his ex-wife to understand his position when it's revealed he wasn't at the hospital when his daughter was born. Gi-Hun reveals he saw a man die at his work the same day his daughter was born, so he couldn't be there with his wife. For verbs in his performance, Gi-Hun shifts from begging and trying to convince his ex-wife to give him money, to later to arguing and berating her to make her understand why he wasn't at the hospital with her when their daughter was born. After Gi-Hun has a confrontation with his ex-wife's new husband, he's approached by the police officer Wang Jun-ho, who is looking for his missing brother. Later we see Gi-Hun returning to the games by climbing into the van that will take them to the island. So we're at the end of episode 2, and Gi-Hun's arc has shown how far he's fallen, deeper into desperation as his overall objective of getting out of financial debt becomes more out of reach. Heading into episode 3, we see Gi-Hun back in the barracks, standing near Il-nam as the old man reawakens. Their dynamic is similar to earlier scenes where Gi-Hun seems to not have any ulterior motives towards Il-nam, and even says that he's become fond of him. Soon, Sang-woo and another player, Ali, join them, and Gi-Hun recruits them to form a team. As a scene objective, Gi-Hun tries to rally these players together to ensure greater success in the games. For verbs, Gi-Hun charms and cajoles Sang-woo, Ali, and Il-nam, forming the first version of their team. In a way, he's still manipulating others, but he's doing it in a more charming, proactive way than in earlier scenes. Later on, we see these four men eating a meal together, and Gi-Hun continues on the same scene objective to draw the team together by bringing up old memories with Sang-woo. But Sang-woo shuts this down and tells him to focus on figuring out the next game. By the middle of episode 3, Gi-Hun and his team head into the second game with the sugar cookies. They're trying to figure out what the game is, but it's not clear at first. As a scene objective, Gi-Hun is acting as a de facto leader by asking questions out loud, trying to get the team to brainstorm together. As verbs, he invites them into asking questions and trying to figure out the game. It's revealed that Sang-woo stumbles on what the game will be after a clue from Se-byuk, but Sang-woo keeps it to himself. This is an important moment that distinguishes Sang-woo from Gi-Hun. Sang-woo is only looking out for himself, while Gi-Hun wants to help out the whole team. There's even a moment when Sang-woo almost appears to want to tell Gi-Hun more about the game as everyone walks forward to form lines at the doors. But Sang-woo hesitates and holds back. Gi-Hun doesn't think any more of this and just cheers his teammate on. For the rest of episode 3, once the game is revealed, we see Gi-Hun frantically trying to succeed at getting the umbrella shape removed from his cookie. He finally gets it done when he eases the separation process by licking at the cookie's bottom. The last shot of Gi-Hun in episode 3 is a tight close-up on his face as he gasps in exhaustion, learning that he has passed the game. So at the end of episode 3, Gi-Hun's arc has gone through several stages since his first appearance in episode 1. He's still pursuing his overall objective to get out of his financial debt, and by exploring his specific objectives in each of his scenes, we see that Gi-Hun constantly shifts his tactics and tries to manipulate others to get out of his bad circumstances. But it isn't working for him and actually makes his situation worse. This only increases his desperation as the parameters around him become more heightened with the larger-than-life games on the island. Looking back at these scene objectives and identifying playable verbs and intentions for Gi-Hun really shows the complexity in the performance and how to pace it over these 3 consecutive episodes.